Okay, so topic for the day, menopause and how do we work through our decreasing hormone levels and body composition changes. The first thing that I want to address before we get into how do we manage our nutrition and our exercise relative to menopause is this. I want you to take a look at your life and make sure that a lot of the habits that you have in life are not contributing to your body composition regardless of your estrogen and progesterone levels. What that means is I want you to take a look at things like your current nutrition habits, your sleep habits, and your activity levels, and make sure those three factors are not contributing mostly to where you are body composition wise, regardless again of your hormones. So for instance, a lot of women may notice in their late 30s, 40s, early 50s, their activity levels decrease significantly. And this can be for a whole host of reasons. It could be because you took a job where you're in a leadership role, a manager role, and you're spending a lot more time at your desk, a lot more time sitting. It could be because you used to have young kids, and as your kids got older, you aren't as active because you're not chasing the little kid around the house, you're not constantly picking up after them, you're not going to the park, doing things like that, right? And it also could be maybe you're in retirement age, or starting to get into retirement age, and maybe you've gone down to part-time and you're just overall not as active throughout your day. So that's number one. Be honest with yourself about your true activity levels and make sure that that is not one of the biggest contributors to your body composition. Secondly, where are your sleep levels? I understand that menopause can impact how you sleep, your quality of sleep, and the duration of sleep. But I also want to challenge you to look at what are your current sleep habits. Do you wind down 30 to 45 minutes before you want to go to bed? Are you making sure that you're staying away from your phones and computers before you go to bed, at least 30 to 45 minutes? And are you intentional with your sleep? Do you have sleep planned out? Do you get up at about the same time every morning? Is your room cool? Are you setting yourself up for success, right? Because again, if I have a 25-year-old or a 55-year-old, if their sleep is crap, they are going to struggle across the board with their body composition, with performance in the gym, with what their food cravings are like. Okay, and then the last thing is your nutrition in general. So for instance, or not for instance, so as an example, I recently met with an athlete of mine, client of mine, and a lot of her nutrition struggles were not because of her menopause, but were just some habits that we needed to work on. For instance, she wasn't eating before and after training, and she was training quite a bit. And then she wouldn't eat until she would finish her training, sometimes 2 or 3 hours of training, and then she wouldn't eat for 2 or 3 hours after she trained. And then she wasn't having carbohydrates at night or before she went to bed, so she was never replenishing her glycogen stores, which is the storage form of carbohydrates. So she was always running low on energy, and her body was in a state where it was using her own muscle to facilitate recovery of the new muscle, and she was stuck in a vicious cycle. So overall, you need to take a look at how you're eating and making sure, are you getting enough protein? You should be getting 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein. So for instance, a 150-pound woman is going to be consuming somewhere between 110, 125 grams to 150 grams of protein minimum. That's no matter how old you are. Are you getting in adequate carbohydrates? I understand that it's extremely frustrating sometimes to hear all of the science and they say low carb, no carb, fasting, all that stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of those studies, the majority of those studies are done on men, and if they do bring women into the studies, those studies are often done on women who are menstruating and who are also on birth control, because it's easier to control for the menstrual cycle if they are not getting a normal regulated menstrual cycle. So we have to process that and appreciate that most women do really well between 200 and 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, regardless of activity level. So are you getting in enough carbohydrates? Not getting in enough can stress your body out. Stress equals cortisol equals a propensity to have higher body fat levels, okay? And then are you getting in your vegetables? Are you eating mostly whole foods? This is something that we don't often talk about, but whole foods, consuming a whole food diet, 70 to 80% of your daily intake as mostly whole foods is going to support a healthy metabolism, because it takes more work for your body to break down broccoli than it does to break down, some saltine crackers. So when you're looking at your diet, I encourage all of my clients and my athletes to create a food journal for 7 days, but with pictures to see how you're eating, right? Writing down, it's not nearly as impactful as literally having a picture of what you just ate for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And you can see the quality of the foods you're eating. And again, it should be, no matter if you are a top level athlete or if you are, working from home and train 3 days a week, you need to be eating 70 to 80% of your diet as whole foods minimum, okay? The more sedentary you are, the more I encourage you to eat even more whole foods, because you want to set your body up for success as much as possible, and you don't have to worry as much about the timing of your nutrition if you're not as active. The other thing about that is we want to make sure that we're giving our bodies all of the nutrients it needs to thrive. So whole foods provide our bodies with nature's vitamins instead of the processed stuff, which are synthetic vitamins, which our bodies don't efficiently use. Okay, so whole foods is extremely important. So before we get into how to work your body composition around menopause, you need to first make sure your activity levels haven't decreased because of life. You're getting in 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, and it's good solid sleep, and you've set yourself up to have a consistent sleep routine regardless of where our hormones are. And we're eating a solid diet of 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein. We're getting in adequate carbohydrates, and we're getting in at least 4 to 6 servings of veggies, some fruit, and mostly whole food diet, 70 to 80%, okay? Then after that, we can have this conversation about how to manage your body composition relative to your changing hormones. So I highly, highly recommend that you read the book Roar by Dr. Stacy Sims. She has a whole chapter on menopause. And what I'm gonna do is kind of go over, in layman's terms, a lot of what she breaks down in that book. So the way menopause works, our body has decreasing progesterone and estrogen. When that happens, we have to fight harder to maintain muscle, and we have to be even more mindful of our diet choices because of our decreasing metabolism, right? And one of those things is our decreasing estrogen makes us less insulin sensitive, combined with the fact that our body is breaking down muscle almost as fast as we're putting it on, right? We end up with a slowing metabolism. So what we want to do is we want to first look at what are the macronutrients, the carbohydrates, protein, and fat that you need for your goals. I like the Precision Nutrition Calculator because it takes into account age. You can go to precisionnutrition.com/nutrition-calculator, put all of your information in, and it will create a PDF, and then it has you use the hand portions for tracking, which is phenomenal because most people don't really need to be tracking using MyFitnessPal. Gauging guesstimates throughout the day and recognizing nutrition is fluid is going to be your most consistent and easy way to be mindful of what you're eating. All right, so after you have that, and after you have your intakes relative to your activity level, to your particular goals, we're gonna look at what should that food be comprised of. And again, you're gonna go and you're gonna find they're gonna put you on 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein, And then their baseline, they usually put individuals at 30% protein, 30% fat, and 40% carbohydrates, which is perfect for a woman in late perimenopause, menopause or post, because our bodies aren't as efficient at using carbohydrates. That doesn't mean you don't need carbohydrates. It just means that you might need less, okay? And now those carbohydrates need to be comprised of mostly whole food sources, because as your estrogen decreases, you're not as sensitive to the insulin your body produces. Insulin is the boat that helps the carbohydrate or the glucose get into the cell. And a lot of times as we're getting older, both because of menopause and because of genetics, we aren't as sensitive to the insulin our body produces. So the insulin's knocking on the cell door, and the cell's like, I'm not gonna let you in. And then that carbohydrate is just floating around, and then we end up with higher fasting blood glucose. So if you eat whole food carbohydrate sources, it allows a slower trickle of carbohydrates into the bloodstream, which allows the insulin that is available to get those carbs into the cell. And then you don't have those carbs just floating around, okay? So whole food carbohydrate sources, or lower glycemic index carbs, AKA whole foods, sweet potatoes, fruit, squash, things like that, are gonna set you up to help manage body composition from a nutrition standpoint relative to carbohydrates. And then if we are training really hard, we can have some processed carbohydrates just around our training. So I have a client who has a Pop-Tart in the morning before she goes and does a really hard Saturday workout. Her body is going to use those carbohydrates from that Pop-Tart right away. And then she's gonna have some apple juice middle of her training, and then she's gonna go home and she's gonna eat whole food carbs post-training, okay? So you're gonna play around with how many carbs you need. And then probably for the majority of you, you won't have carbs again until dinner time. And those carbs are gonna be whole food carbs, like rice. You can have white rice, squash, potatoes. If you wanna have bread, we're choosing whole grain bread just because it's a little bit more complex, takes a little bit longer to slow down, okay? And then maybe we have a pre-bed snack of some fruit, or if you're gonna train hard the next day, you can have a bowl of cereal. If you're sensitive to carbs for sleep, you may wanna have a bowl of cereal to help you with your sleep. But it's looking like carbs around training, no carbs when I'm not doing any activity, carbs for dinner, maybe a carb snack for bed. And then we need to talk about what the rest of your day looks like. I highly encourage everybody, but especially my perimenopause, menopause ladies, to start getting in the habit of walking every single day. And I absolutely recommend a 30 to 45 minute walk. These walks are gonna be twofold. They're gonna help manage cortisol levels, which cortisol levels encourage our body to store fat, and they're also going to use body fat as fuel without stressing our bodies out at all. So if we do that with a combination of strength training 4 to 5 days a week, and I mean heavy strength training, not 2-pound dumbbells, right? We're crossfitters. I'm speaking to the CrossFit community mostly here. We're lifting heavy, that is our foundation of fitness. Why does that matter? Because we are trying to make sure that we maintain muscle mass as we age. Maintaining that muscle mass is going to positively impact our metabolism, as well as help us avoid falling as we get older, manage bone density, okay? So 4 to 5 days a week of an hour plus of strength training. And then we're gonna start to tweak our metcons a little bit. So it's not something that is often talked about. Dr. Stacy Sims talks about it, but metcons create a cortisol response. And we're trying to manage our cortisol levels because we're already having less insulin sensitivity. And if our cortisol levels are up, that's going to negatively impact our blood sugar. So when our body produces cortisol, it tells our brain to dump sugar into our bloodstream because we have to run away from the lion. But if there's no lie in there, if it was a metcon, right, I don't necessarily need that much sugar, and I don't need it to stay up for an extended period of time. And if I'm not having the insulin to be present to take that sugar away. So when we fitness, we are more insulin sensitive, and we actually have a bypass system that allows the sugar to get into the cell without insulin. But again, as we age, that system isn't as effective, right? So if we're doing high intensity fitness a lot, we have cortisol levels that are up a lot, which means that we are having an even harder time getting those carbohydrates into the cell. So late perimenopause, menopause ladies, I highly suggest that you start looking at metconning 2 to 3 days a week. And then if you're following a class workout, play around with, maybe you make the metcons additional strength training. You look at it and say it's like, you know, Cindy, for instance, right? Well, can you do strict Cindy, and can you focus on positions and maybe weight the air squats and not try to go ham on it and tempo it, and, you know, challenge yourself to use it as a strength piece instead of a conditioning piece? If you do that, if you get your heart rate up 2 or 3 times a week in metcons, and then you walk consistently and strength train, you're going to manage inflammation, manage cortisol levels, set your body up to use fat as fuel consistently, manage your metabolism, and then you're overall going to feel better. We do that, we make sure we get enough vegetables, we prioritize whole food carbs around training. We're setting ourselves up to have a really happy body, and we're gonna feel really good about our body composition, okay? Comment down below if you have any questions. I'm sure I opened up a whole can of worms talking about a lot of this. I am here for you. I will make follow-up content for any questions you have, and I hope this helps streamline the process of managing your body composition as your hormones change. Thanks for watching if you made it to the end, and I will see you later.